mountains, plural. How could one ship rest on several mountains at once? Moreover, Mount Ararat is over 17,000 feet high. It would have been extremely cold at that altitude. How then were the animals from the tropics kept from freezing to death? Seventh, Genesis 8:8 says, quote, he, that is Noah, sent forth a dove to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground, unquote. Why on earth would Noah send out a bird to get information that is clearly evident to anyone energetic enough to look outward from the boat's deck? Eighth, Genesis 8:11 says, quote, the dove came back to him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf, unquote. Where would the dove find an olive leaf to freshly pluck? After all, the earth had just been submerged for a year, and all of the vegetation must have been killed. God said he would kill everything. Ninth, after Noah landed and got out of the ark, Genesis 8:20 says, quote, Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took from every clean beast and every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar, unquote. Sacrificing animals which you have just worked hard to save, which have only 2 of each kind remaining, is preposterous. 10th, Genesis 7:13 says, quote, in the same day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them into the ark, unquote. If the human race rose anew from Noah and his sons, then all the different varieties of men who now people the earth must have developed from Noah's immediate family. And this was done in the short space of 4,000 years. But science proves conclusively that the various races owe their origin to a variety of ancestors who lived 1,000,000 years before the dawn of written history. On Egyptian monuments created long before the age of the fabled flood, the features of Egyptians, Semites, and blacks can be seen chiseled in stone. 11th, Genesis 8:19 says, quote, every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatever creeps upon the earth after their kinds went out of the ark, unquote. How were the animals preserved after leaving the ark? There was no vegetation except that which had been submerged for a year. How were the plant-eating herbivores taken care of until the earth was again covered with plants and vegetation? 12. And how did only 8 people feed, water, and remove the waste of what must have been the greatest menagerie in history, the greatest zoo in history? 13th, what did meat-eating carnivores eat after leaving the ark, since the only animals available for food were those on the ark? And lastly, Genesis 8:3 says, quote, the waters return from off the earth continually. And after the end of 150 days, the waters were abated, unquote, while the 13th verse says, quote, the waters were dried up from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry, unquote. Where did all the water come from that covered all of the world's mountains, including Mount Everest, which is over 29,000 feet high? And where did it go? In light of all we have mentioned so far, one can easily understand why some fundamentalists are willing to concede the obvious. For example, the biblicist Arndt says the following on pages 111 and 112 of his book entitled Bible Difficulties. Quote, "In beginning our examination of alleged difficulties in this narrative, let me say that Bible Christians, of course, admit that the account of the flood contains many features which have to be classified as miraculous. That is, as things which we cannot understand." Unquote. Well, that's certainly an understatement. Later on page 114 in the same book, Arndt says, quote, "In Genesis 7:21 we read, quote, 'All flesh died that moved upon the earth, both of fowl and of cattle and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, and every man,' unquote, unquote." Verses 22 and 23 are similar in content. And then he says, "That the powers of imagination are baffled by this, we have to admit," unquote. Well, it's nice to see he's willing to concede that much. An even more powerful indictment of belief in the flood, is found on pages 210 and 211 of a book entitled A Survey of the Old Testament by Gleason Archer. He's one of the most well-known of all fundamentalists, and he's the author of the book entitled The Encyclopedia of Bible Difficulties. He states, quote, "Formidable scientific problems are raised by a universal flood." Well, that's for sure. Problems such as, now this is him speaking. He's speaking this, not I. First, according to the best estimates, to cover the highest Himalayas would require 8 times more water than our planet.